Today we have Manu in the next episode of the Engineering Unplugged podcast. Welcome, Manu. Manu has over 17 years of experience in software development, with experience spanning small startups and large enterprises. He started his career with a semiconductor company coding in C and C++. Then he moved to Zynga, where he started building highly scalable systems. He spent a long time in Flipkart, in teams such as demand forecasting, inventory planning, decision science platform, financial data engineering, etc. Although it was his fourth company, Manu says he spent his formative years there in Flipkart. While at Dunzo, he was its chief architect. He played a key role in scaling Dunzo for the IPL 2022's sale event. He's currently an Atlassian as my colleague. He loves coding and loves building products that users love. Great to have you here, Manu. Welcome.
Same here, Bhavin.
Awesome. Let's dive in. Tell me more about your war stories from the early years.
I think I'll tell something from my experience in Zynga. This happened back in 2010.
Okay.
So Zynga was making games only for Facebook, right?
Right.
Zynga wanted to make those games social network agnostic. And I was lucky to be part of that project. So Zynga made its games available, some of its games available in Zynga's own network. And there is one more social network. It's now defunct, called Yahoo Pulse. So I was part of the project, and the deadlines were very crazy. Back in those days, deadlines used to be crazy. Zynga was a startup and much to be done in too short time. And here I had joined Zynga just a month ago, and I was put into this project. See, I come from C++ background, right? No experience in HTTP, honestly, right? And now I'm put in a project where this game is obviously, you have to keep scale into mind while building it. It's in a different language. It's in a very different tech stack. And all of it has to be done in a very, very short period of time, right? Of course, the game was developed. The code had to be changed to make the game social network agnostic.
Okay.
I think at that point in time, at least I felt this is an impossible project, right? And at least to me, it felt impossible because there are too few people working in that project, right? Especially when it was ported to Yahoo and Yahoo's social network. And by the time the project got extended to port to the third social network, Zynga's own social network, I was literally the only engineer. But what that allowed me is to, go through some intense learning experiences, very intense learning experiences, learning new tech stack, adapting new ways of coding, from an enterprise way of coding where, you have to be very careful of what you code. It's a B2B system, there is too much focus on quality, and testing for quality is also too hard, right? From that kind of coding to a B2C system where, where there is some margin in quality, right?
Right.
There is some room for error, right? But you have to be coding very fast because you have to be building features very fast. So, but that experience actually brought out I would say a good engineer out of me. So it was an intense learning of 2 months, right? I considered many times, quitting Zynga during those 2 months. But at the end, after these two releases, I got a lot of recognition from my colleagues, right?
Yeah, you would have gotten a lot of confidence as well.
Got a lot of confidence for sure, right? And learned a bunch of new stuff, and it got me confidence to take on new projects, possibly later in life, right? All the new companies I joined, new projects I took on with new technologies, I wasn't as afraid, right? Maybe there are incidences like this that shaped me as an engineer and what I'm today.
So I'm just wondering, you came from a semiconductor C++ sort of a background. What prompted you to join a very different domain? So that is one part of the question, but also didn't the company have any reservations? Like the hiring, today, like these days, the resume just gets rejected in the hiring funnel itself. So how do
Yeah.
you even get in? Like how did that happen?
I think it's easier to make those switches early in career. Like, I mean, I made the switch with 4 years experience, right? With an SD2 kind of role. I think it is somewhat easier there. But maybe if I had 10 years experience in C, C++, and now I'm trying to, let's say, join an internet company, possibly it would have been way more difficult, right? I
Right.
think making that switch early on in the career makes a big deal, right? I mean, it's a very important. And it also depends on the company. Some companies hire for context and some companies hire for skills
Yeah.
and learning and draw smarts and stuff. Zynga had a, I would say, different hiring process, right? There was even puzzles in one of the in one of the rounds, and
Oh,
of course, basic PSDS and basic design. These are like general software skills, and and engineers without internet background can also crack. So much later, when I joined Flipkart, in fact, we had very similar kind of loop, right? Although not the puzzles round, which was relevant for Zynga, right? Because you'd be in you'd be writing code for a game, and you need to understand some level of math, right? While coding for
right.
game. But at Flipkart also, we tested for generic skills, right? Problem solving, data structures, design, system architecture, right?
Yeah.
At entry level, even system architecture, at a 0 to 5 years experience level, you don't even ask system architecture. And hence, it is possible for people like me, right, who started their career with C, C++ to join an internet company and have that experience. And now to answer your question as to like, why did I move? I was very interested in, I would say, moving to a company which builds products that, let's say, my friends and relatives use, right? So this is
Hmm.
something that I missed during early part of my career, right? When somebody asks, hey, what do you do? Right? It took me like 2.5 minutes to explain what I do. Look, I work for a company that makes equipments that companies like Intel and Samsung use. Oh, do you make equipments? No, I write software. Oh, is it device driver? No, it's a layer between application software and device driver, right? So by that time, obviously they're lost. What
Yeah.
happens? So uh, what happens if you're on Flipkart when somebody says, "Hey, where do you work?" I said Flipkart. Oh wow, Flipkart, right? That's a product that like that's a product, that's a service that people around you like love to use, right? Same was the case in Zynga when I joined, right? So it's a great experience, right, to move from a company that's like a B2B enterprise, nobody knows the name,
Yeah.
to a company that's like well recognized and whose problems I can relate to more.
Yeah, and back then, though, Zynga was a huge name. It was a
Yeah.
developer of Farmville. Everybody knew Farmville because of Facebook, which was, of course, a big thing back then.
Mm.
Today, not so much, but yeah. You brought an interesting point, Manu. Specialist hiring versus generalist hiring. Those are the two interview styles. And generalist hiring is basically testing for generic skills, problem solving, software writing, low level design, high level design. Specialist interviews are more on, do you know Spring Boot? Do you know struts?
Yeah.
Have you worked in Python? Is it in general better to go and work for companies who try to hire generalists, or is that like one illusion and maybe there is other side to the story as well?
See, from a candidate perspective, of course, right, you might have preferences, right? From a company perspective, here is the thing, right? A company can't always choose to hire generalists, right? See, personally, I choose the generalist hiring loop, right?
Right.
As an interviewer, right, I choose that. As a candidate, also, I would want that, right?
Yeah.
Because skill sets are fungible, technologies are changing, problem statements are changing, business models are changing in the company, right? And hence, technology choices might be changing. So it's always good to hire engineers for generic skills. However, it's not always true. let's say if you want to hire an engineer for Android team, right? So, and if you want somebody to come and develop an Android application for you and guide engineers on how to build an Android app, you can't hire somebody with just problem solving and data structures, no matter how good that person is, how good
Right.
that engineer is. Right?
Yeah, they must know the tech.
Yeah. And early part of the company, let's say the company is only 5 engineers, these skills do matter.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah, you better know the language, you better know the framework. You
Yeah.
can't learn on the job. There is no time. Correct.
Yeah. So it depends on company's preference. It depends on the phase in which the company is in.
Right.
Yeah. But if I were to choose, I would maybe choose a generalist hiring.
It probably allows you to go deep as well. I think DevOps is also one area. DevOps slash platform. Platform is more generic, but DevOps specifically, where you should know specific skills to succeed. It's of course comes with a specific mindset as well. So yeah, that's an example of like specialist hiring as well. So you have come a long way, and you of course had a long career since Zynga. How have you managed to professionally upskill yourself on the route? And what are your routines where you keep learning new things? And how do you discover those things? How do you keep yourself polished?
Yeah. Upskilling is something that, I do it on, I would say, almost quarterly basis. I have
Yeah,
been in senior IC roles, right, for the last
right.
several years, right? So being an architect, then later, chief architect, here now senior principal engineer, all
Yeah,
of them are very, very hands-on kind of roles. So people around you, like engineers around you, reach out to you looking for specific technical solutions,
right.
right? And you need to provide that, right? As the senior individual contributor, IC in the team, you need to provide that to your colleagues.
Yeah, you're saying specific solutions, like not just the design, not just
Not
the
design, right?
approach.
Yeah. So people might reach out and say, hey, I'm having a GC problem, right? Now you need to guide them there, right? Hey, like I want to build a streaming pipeline for order stream. Like what should I do, right? You need to provide a specific solution that is more suitable for the company and that gels well with the existing ecosystem.
Right.
And every company has its own tech stack, right? So that's why
Correct.
upskilling is very, very important. And at least for those of us who have chosen this IC ladder that they call it, right?
Yeah.
Architect ladder, IC ladder, right? All the new terms. Upskilling is not just a good to have, but it's a must have, right? If you don't upskill, you cannot survive in this industry.
Yeah, you're essentially dead.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
One thing, I mean, I've been doing several things. I can share a few with the viewers here, right?
Yep.
One is I keep taking, I would say learning breaks, right?
Okay.
Whenever I'm switching to a new technology or whenever I'm actually, like switching to a new company, right? So when I joined Dunzo, for example, I didn't know Golang. Dunzo was 75% Golang, right? Dunzo backend.
Yeah.
Now I had to learn Golang. So I actually took some time off, right? And learned the language.
Right.
And I have a way of learning the language also. Of course, like going through the docs and stuff like that, but that's only the start. I write a code and I run a few programs and then I start learning the language. But I don't stop there, right? I write a product or a tool that is usable. So the litmus test for me is something that I find useful, I build. But to me, I graduate out of it only if others find it useful. So in case of Golang, right, when I started learning Golang back in 2020, I wrote a tool, posted it on GitHub, and then it so happened that it got a lot of attention, and it came in Hacker News front page.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, for a brief, like for a for a few hours in a day, right? Not the entire day also.
Yeah.
It got some attention. To me, that is a way that I know, okay, now I am comfortable, like building something that users can use in a technology that I have just learned, right?
Right.
And of course, I was able to use that skill later, during my tenure in Dunzo,
Yeah.
right? So similarly, like when I joined Flipkart, I was new to like several technologies, like, HBase.
Hmm.
It was unheard of. I didn't even know the word, right? So how do I go about it? Of course, like hands-on coding, building
Right.
tools, building products that other users, in this case, other users can be other developers, right?
Right.
Need not always, if you're building a platform, your users are developers, engineers in other teams, right? Or analysts or data scientists in other teams. So build something and learn. So that has been my routine. And
Interesting.
yeah,
So this is forced by or facilitated by the job switches.
yeah.
But job switches happen just a few times in your career, right? So what do you like? How do you upskill other times? Like, do you keep touching and trying out other technologies? For example, Rust. Like, have you picked up Rust yet? Uh,
Yeah, Rust I have just just played around. Don't know the language well yet. See, although company switches happen uh, rarely, at least in my case, right? I stick to companies for some years. Team switches happen.
ah,
Right? You move from one product to another. One team is in some order management, let's say, right? Another team is in some big data. Another team is in
yeah,
some homepage. Um, Different teams, because of the nature of the products that they're building, are in different technologies. So upskilling has to happen like very frequently. In my case, at least in my Flipkart tenure, I ended up being in 4 different teams, right? And countless number of products. So what it meant is, like upskilling had to be way more frequent than, let's say, like switching companies.
right. Um, Interesting. Manu, how do you go deep? Like, let's say you pick up a language,
Mhm.
and everybody is going to understand it only up to an extent. Syntax is very easy. You will understand more complex constructs. Then comes a like a hurdle where you have to understand the implementation details of that language. How
Yeah.
does Java construct an object versus how does Python construct an object? And how do you optimize the object construction? You have to understand how constructors work. You have to understand how memory allocation works. Let's say you didn't know those things. Like, did it ever happen? I'm sure it would have happened early in your career that you didn't understand a concept and you were just lost. How did you get over it? um, did you chat with colleagues or friends, or like, what was your struggle? Tell us an example there.
Yeah, actually, good question. I mean, now that I'm recollecting, see the way I went through those struggles, initial struggles of like learning a new language or a new technology,
Yeah.
have changed actually over time. See, back when, let's say, when I learned Java long back, right? Those were the days when these edutech companies were not very popular, right? YouTube, right, was not very popular, right?
Right.
Back in 2000s, right?
Yeah.
Now, how do you learn a language when none of these existed? So during those times, learning new technology, let's say when I learned Oracle database, right? So I had to lean heavily on understanding these nuances and constructs, right?
Right.
Regarding understanding them, I had to rely heavily on my colleagues, right? Reading a lot of existing code, writing code reviews, so on and so forth. But now I think over the last 1.5 decades, learning a new technology or new language, in general, upskilling, right? That's a word you used, right?
Yeah.
Upskilling has become much, much easier, not just for technical skills, but also for soft skills, right?
Right.
You can now, like take a tutorial and then get started on the topic. It will not make you a expert yet, right?
Yeah.
Expertise comes only from hands-on experience, right? Literally only from hands-on experience. For that matter, I would say, I would go to the extent of saying you can't even be a intermediate without a hands-on experience. You can only be a beginner, maybe watching a bunch of tutorials.
Right.
It's a good start. It gives you a jump start at learning new technology or in general upskilling yourself.
Yeah. Puts you rolling, like puts you in the second gear where
Yeah.
you can move forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I couldn't have done this. I use Final Cut Pro. I use these mics and editing software. It would have taken a long time, like a decade ago,
Yeah.
for me to learn all of this without all the educational resources. YouTube has come a long way, so I have of course used YouTube a lot. uh, to upskill. Um, but like, so did the conferences, etc. help? Did you go to a lot of conferences in your early days?
Yeah, I mean, the companies I work for, they encouraged me to go to conferences, which I did, right? Since my literally the first company I worked for.
Yeah,
Conferences help me networking for sure, right? And in many cases for me, conferences also help me, like get in touch with a person who is working on a similar idea, similar project, similar technology,
right.
right? And sometimes even, like solving some issue that I was experiencing in my current company or current project.
Because you could reach out to that network and ask for help.
Yeah, and it had a very good positive side effect, right? Of course, I learned a lot from the speakers in the conferences, right? Of course, right? We go to conferences to hear from the speakers.
Right.
But to me, more than the speakers themselves and more than looking at the presentation presented on the stage, I learned a lot from, like socializing. Like, I remember one such example, right? I remember I was in a small art tech startup and I was stuck on a Redis related issue, concurrency related issue. And this was a very old version of Redis a decade ago, right? So I attended this Fifth Elephant conference. They had like good talks. And another company was also, like working on some Redis scaling. And I met one of the people from that company, not a speaker, right? Discussed
Hmm.
the problem, and that person was kind enough to, like spend some 5-10 minutes, and he gave me a solution. If I had, if I had to, like figure out a solution myself, it would have probably taken me weeks.
Or probably never.
Huh. Probably not never, but I'm sure long time, right? You'll eventually figure some solution out, right?
Okay.
You'll iterate, trial and error, and you'll find some way out, right?
Hmm.
But because another person had very similar problem, and I could actually learn from that mistake and learn from their mistake, and I
Yeah.
could actually implement a solution, right? So yeah, I think lot of learning from there as well.
Do we get that socializing today? Like, this is a very interesting point. I mean, today everybody networks on, social networks, and it's like very entertainment focused, basically. Those social networks, like, we are probably very, very like over entertained in today's age, and I'm not sure if we need so much entertainment.
Yeah,
But the networking, like the real networking, right? Knowing new people, that has taken a hit. So, how do you meet new people?
yeah,
And on the other side, of course, like, what do you think about all these social media distractions that are doing to that? What is its impact on developers
sure.
today? So both networking as well as social media. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, there are multiple questions. I'll try to answer them all, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think social media has had a profound positive impact on all of us, right? Like definitely, there is no second thoughts about it. And for me, at least, it has been net positive. That said, you use the word entertained, right? Maybe as a generation, we are a bit too entertained. So much so that we want everything to be entertaining,
Yeah.
right? It has even seeped down to kids, right? Even learning a hard math concept or even learning some new programming language. I mean, I'm talking about like kids learning a programming language or kids learning software.
Right.
That also, the expectation right now is it has to be entertaining.
Yeah. Like young folks, 3, 4, 5 years. Programming language
Yeah.
should be maybe 7, 8 years.
7-8 years, right?
Yeah.
And same goes for us, right? People who are in their 30s, 40s, right? Even the ones who were used to, like doing things the hard way, right? Even they want things very entertaining now. So there are, but I think that's where things have to stop, and that's where I think we need to draw a line, right? I see a lot of interesting videos on YouTube, but some of them are like, like learn about this book, Atomic Habits, in 5 minutes, right? Learn
Yeah.
about this book, Thinking Fast and Slow, in 7 minutes, right?
Yeah.
See,
Seven things you're missing out
something.
from thinking fast and slow. Uh,
Yeah, I think that is probably, I mean, maybe that's a good start to just pick the interest, but I think you have to read the book for sure, right?
Yeah.
Somebody has put decades of their learning condensed into a book that you can read in 4 hours or like 5 hours or 8 hours, right?
Yeah.
If you try to condense them any further, right, condense them any further, I think you would not benefit at all, right? It's like driving, right? How long does it take for somebody to learn driving? 10 hours. I mean, typically in Bangalore, they have 10 days, each day 1 hour kind of driving lesson, right? So in
Yeah.
10 hours, you'd learn driving. But how long does it take for you to explain what is driving? 10 minutes or lesser, right? I can just sit and tell you, hey, Bhavin, look, there is clutch, there is brake, there is accelerator. Yes, sure, right? But can you drive a car with that 10-minute tutorial? Maybe yes, maybe not, right? So I see all this, I think of all these books, right? Reading books, especially the
Yeah.
one mentioned now, as learning new skills. And that cannot happen in 5 minutes or 10 minutes, right? That takes as much time as one learns driving, right? For sure. Now, regarding your second question on distractions, I think it has become a pandemic now, right? Just like COVID, it has become a pandemic. I see people literally unable to have a meeting without checking Slack. For starters, it is rude, of course, right? It is rude to check Slack. You know, you're having an intense design discussion, and
Yeah.
somebody is distracted by, uh, and it's not even social media, right? Uh,
Yeah.
Slack is just official company communication tool, but it has a lot of lasting impacts. I've been in situations like this, without, of course, like going into details, right, and names of people.
Yeah.
So we were having a design discussion where we were deciding design and architecture for one of the components that we were developing, and we were taking very very big decisions. Okay, that would have lasting impact for 2 to 3 years or maybe 4 years, as long as that product was going to last. Now, one of my colleagues was, like, he seemed constantly distracted, right? During that meeting, I didn't pay much attention during the meeting that he was distracted. After the meeting, when I was checking Slack later that day, I saw a lot of his messages timestamped to that design during the discussion that we were having.
Right.
Okay. And I actually asked him, right? And this person is not somebody who's like very young also, right? He's not somebody who is fresh out of college, right? He's a
Right.
person experience. I asked him, look, uh, was a design discussion boring or something? I mean, or did you think it was do you think it was not as important? I mean, I saw your Slack messages during our design discussion later.
Yeah.
Why so? And to his credit, actually, he thought deeply and he said, he gave very honest answer. He says, I don't know. Yeah, I think that's a very good answer, right? And very honest answer. He just didn't know why he felt compelled to message on Slack, that too for a issue which is not a, that too for something that's not a production issue, not even an issue, right?
Right.
That for a, right? And it is rampant in our industry. It is rampant in our industry. Mm, we need to strike a balance. On one hand, I think we need to communicate with our colleagues, send updates. And as far as social media, I think we need to use social media very effectively, right? It's an amazing tool, right?
Right.
On the other hand, also, we should not let it become, like a compulsion for us. Like, if I don't check LinkedIn every hour, or if I don't check WhatsApp every 5 minutes, right, I feel something is missing from my life, right? It should not become that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It has unconsciously become that actually. We have
Yeah.
somehow gotten trained to just stimulate our brains constantly,
Yeah.
and then this habit forms. So you
Yeah.
automatically feel some sort of an anxiety when
Yeah.
you're not doing anything. So it has become very hard to basically just sit idle,
Yeah.
right? And I think that is something just worth redeveloping.
Definitely. And you are uh, sometime earlier in this conversation, you had asked me about upskilling,
Yeah.
right? Upskilling cannot happen without, like, taking all the distractions away. it's just not possible. If you have to learn a new tool, if you want to learn a new skill, if you want to learn a new technology, language, new type of database, new type of caching, right?
Yeah.
You need to spend intense time, zero distractions, right? Intense time, and then like absorb all the things that you are actually learning. And without upskilling, of course, you can't have a fruitful career, right? That has been my experience.
Yeah. Actually, thinking about it, you can't also upskill without feeling bored. There are going to be parts which are dry, right? You have to get through them, and only after a point it will become more interesting.
Yeah,
Can't be interesting from page one, right? Line one of your code. So that boredom also becomes very important. Reading books. Do you do that today? Uh,
yeah. I
these
love
years.
reading books, and not exactly reading. I mean, listening to books nowadays, Audible, for example.
Okay. Do you do technical books? Like, I'm sure you read like technical books which tell you more about newer technologies, newer architectural paradigms with all the cloud shift happening. Um, in fact, like, oh, that brings me to an interesting point. By the way, just to close on the previous one, the deep work, we chatted about it a lot with Swanand in the previous episode. So do catch that if you haven't. But yeah, we are expanding on that topic in like great depths about why deep work is important.
I read books almost, I would say, on a monthly basis. Typically, I cover 2 books in a month.
Right.
Right? Deep Work by Cal Newport. That's one of my favorite books.
Yeah.
Try to implement most of the things that author says. And Chris Bailey's Hyper Focus is another of my favorite books. Right? And especially when you're talking about upskilling, going into that hyper focus mode that he talks about, right?
Yeah.
Right, is very important. And also, you spoke about like doing things that are like boring. Incidentally, that's also very important, right?
Yeah.
You have to apparently get bored, right? That's when you
Yeah.
get good ideas, right? It's called scatter focus, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that is something that a lot of us are having lesser nowadays. Like, let's say if you are waiting for an elevator, right? Or let's say you're waiting at the doctor's clinic, right? The natural tendency is to look at your phone, right?
Yeah.
Just maybe, right? We need to not do that. And maybe we just need to get bored,
Yeah.
right? A change, and then absorb things around in the environment, right? And that actually works great. And
Yeah.
for me, at least, during the periods of upskilling, what I have found very, very helpful for me, I don't know if it's going to help everybody or not. And alternating hyper focus and scatter focus has helped me. Although I did not know these terms until I read the book Hyper Focus. I didn't know these terms, but
Right.
these were things that I was accidentally doing it. Like, like learn a new skill, going to that focused mode,
Yeah.
and then maybe like think about it. When I'm bored, or think about it, or think different nuances of it when I'm just idling, right? So
Yeah.
a good alternate of these two has helped me a lot.
Yeah. I do this. Like, this is a very intentional thing. Waiting in doctor's office, waiting in supermarket lines, waiting at airport, right? Small wait times, 5, 10, 15-minute wait times, where I know it is not going to be longer than that. I intentionally don't take out my phone. Earlier, it used to be immediately like take out the phone, read news, read WhatsApp, right? Read some articles, whatever. Like, no, just no phone and don't do anything. Like, we don't have to do anything at every minute. So I intentionally do that. Yeah, it has helped. Definitely. So, scatter focus. That brings me to my next point, Manu. I have had pleasure of learning many such terms from you. Uh, right. Scatter focus just came out of nowhere in this conversation, and like that, I have learned terms like Hanlon's razor and Occam's razor, and sunk cost fallacy and noisy neighbor. Where do you pick these up? These are jargons that have helped me tremendously, because those two words, those three words, noisy neighbor, it just immediately explains what goes on. Like two containers, being neighbors, and they have a cross-channel talk. Like one just saturates the network, so the other one will not get the network. You can't like look at the explanation just to like build this premise. I had to give such a long explanation, but from there onwards, if you just say noisy neighbor, it just makes the conversation a lot easier. So it allows you to think at a much deeper level by knowing these jargons. And where did you pick these up?
One word, books, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, and different books, right? You mentioned some technical terms, and you mentioned one philosophical term, right?
Yeah.
One word again, books, right? A colleague of mine suggested me this. A colleague of mine actually suggested me this book, right? Thinking Fast and Slow.
Daniel Kahneman. Yeah.
Right? And that had a profound impact on me. So once I read that book, I got more interested in things like cognitive biases, logical fallacies, and so on. That got me interested in, like looking at the Wikipedia article about list of cognitive biases, looking at the Wikipedia article about list of logical fallacies, and
Yeah.
click each link and then learn about them, and so on.
Yeah.
So once I learned about razors, not right, Han's razor, Occam's razor, and that opened up another world, right?
Right.
And very similar things have happened in learning technical terms, right? You start with a book, and the book introduces to you a new concept or a new world of things, and then you start exploring in that world.
Yeah. Yeah. This also goes back to like being bored, right? You could not have learned like 20 different cognitive biases while expecting constant entertainment. Just not possible.
Not possible at all. So specifically, let's say when I learned about all these biases, right? Like maybe hindsight bias, sampling bias, selection
Yeah.
bias.
Yeah.
At that time, like there are some hyper focus that happened. That said, many days later or many even months later, when I'm just idling or like getting bored,
Right.
I inadvertently introspected, I inadvertently observed somebody else's behavior, and then I realized, hey, this is hindsight bias, right?
Yeah.
So that's how I picked up all these jargons, and these concepts, right, have helped me a lot. And more importantly, although these books were never written for an engineer, like ever, right? I don't think, right? It was. Daniel Kahneman in his book literally says this book is for water cooler conversations, right? That's literally what he says, right? Although this book was not written specifically for software engineers, I think as a software engineer, it has helped me greatly. It has helped me choose better solutions.
Yeah.
It has helped me choose better technologies. It has helped me make the right decisions for my team. It has helped me make many things right.
Right. Yeah, it just grows you as a person. And to summarize, how did you come to these terms, right? How did you got exposed to them?
Books.
It was just broad reading, basically.
Yeah.
You didn't, you of course have to read specific books, but you also read random books, books that seemed interesting in various topics, right? And then curiosity. If you saw something new through exposure, then you applied curiosity and went deep. And those two are like very rare things today, because algorithms are feeding us very, very focused stuff. So exposure is hard.
Yeah.
Exposure is very hard. Cool. Sounds good. Thank you for chatting and various perspectives, various deeper thoughts. It was great having you here, Manu. Thank you for taking out the time.
Thanks for having me on your podcast, Bhavin, and see you. Bye-bye.
Yep. Thank you.